Hello and welcome to the Believe Crew podcast. The business is you. I'm Jamie White, founder of Believe Crew and your host. Let's jump right in. Welcome to today's podcast. I have Mary Balistreri here with us today, and she's a mindful business coach. I would love to hear how you got into this business and how you started, and tell us all about your business.
Thank you so much. I started my business, MBT, More Business Today, and I call myself the Mindful Business Coach. It was the end of 2020, and I was in the situation where my job was eliminated, which was okay. I had been focused on eventually starting my own business, and I knew it would be a coaching business. So I had been a director of business development at a big law firm. And then I morphed that job into a business development and leadership coach job. And so the why did I start my business and why this focus comes from years and years in a number of different careers where I always kind of came to the same conclusion, which is that the number one thing that drives me is helping somebody succeed.
Isn't that amazing? I totally get that.
Yes, absolutely. And so many coaches, we are that way.
Right,
That is our motivator. And no matter what job I was in, I would always come back to how can I help these people?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I find ways to, answer the questions that maybe they don't even know they should be thinking about?
Right.
Pose
Ask the
those questions
questions. Right.
so that they can help themselves. Basically, what it's all about, because we learn you can't help someone who is not ready to be helped
Right.
and who does not want to help themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we learn that pretty quickly. And the focus I learned over and over again, the obstacles that would be in the way of people I would work with, whether it was trying to bring in a new client or serve a new client or be a leader. I worked with a
Mm-hmm.
number of people in the beginning who were emerging leaders. And what I found over and over again is that the biggest obstacles were really in everyone's own mind.
Yeah.
And here's an example. Somebody I'm coaching or was coaching uh, was having so many problems at, like let's say it's a networking event, good at meeting people, but not necessarily good at finding prospects. So I asked,
Mm-hmm.
what is it you're thinking about?
Ooh. Ooh.
When you're standing in the room and you're looking at everyone and you know that you want to network to find more clients, right? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, if I'm going to tell you the truth,
Right.
I'm thinking those people aren't going to hire me.
Right.
Or I'm thinking those people can't afford to hire me. And he doesn't even know who those people are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure you've dealt with this too or felt
Yeah.
this. The more that I talk to people, the more I realize it's across the board. The biggest obstacles are the things we tell ourselves.
Yeah. I want to dig into this a little bit with you because I feel like maybe I'll end up getting hot seat coaching on this podcast today.
Maybe.
Because so I'm super extroverted. And if you don't mind going down this road a little bit,
I don't mind at all. Yeah.
because this happens, right? When we're in business, like networking is a thing that maybe we don't have to do when we're in a job, but understanding who are our power partners, who are we connecting with, what associations do we want to be involved in, how do we want to make a difference in our communities, how do we want to show up as leaders. I mean, a lot of emerging leaders end up on nonprofit boards in their communities trying to make a difference, and it helps develop them. It helps develop their power partners. It helps us just kind of grow in ways we maybe didn't expect. But like, I'm a natural extrovert. So I walk into a room and I'm trying to think, like, it's almost like I want you to ask me the question, like, what are you thinking? Um, and just kind of dig in a little bit. What are the different thoughts that you've heard people say? Because I don't even know what I'm thinking. Like, since I'm an extrovert, I'm just excited to be there.
And, it's so interesting because a lot of introverts assume that people who are extroverts, that it's easier for extroverts to bring in
Right.
clients. And it's not
Right.
true.
No, it's not. You're totally right. Yeah.
because there's different strengths, right?
Right.
So a strength for an extrovert would be, as you said, you walk into a room full of people and you're excited to meet them,
Right. Right.
but you're excited to meet them all.
I'm excited to meet them all. They're all
Right,
potential new friends. Yeah.
exactly. And
And
so
not
you might
necessarily new clients.
not, yeah, some of them
Yeah.
might be, some could be referral
Right.
sources, and
Right.
all of that's good.
But I'm just saying that my mindset isn't how many new clients am I going to meet today?
Right,
My mindset is how many new friends am I going to meet today? So what going back to what you said, um, it doesn't it doesn't matter if I'm an extrovert or an introvert. What is my intention about it? What is it that I'd like to get out of the day? Hmm.
right. So when I work with people, I'm very goal oriented to the point where if you're going to serve on a board, what is
Yeah.
your goal for serving on that
Right.
board? For some people, it may be, I just believe in this one thing. That's
Right.
good. That's okay. It doesn't always have to lead to new business, right?
Hmm.
If you go to a networking event and your goal is, I want to make new friends,
Mhm.
that's fine.
Mhm.
However, you need to articulate that for yourself before you go.
Right.
Because what I see with extroverts is, well, I went to all of these events and I don't have any business to show for it,
Right.
right? So, what is it that you're thinking, Jamie?
Oh man, I don't totally know. I'm definitely an extrovert at the level where I'm surprised by what I have to say sometimes, right? So I don't remember what I'm going to say. I know that I've been intentional last 12 months about getting into new circles in new rooms to shift my thinking, to shift my circle of
Mhm.
influence. I wanted to be around people that um that believed in healthy leadership in organizations, that believed in a shift in mindset thinking. I know that you're a part of NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners, and
Yes,
leading the Wisconsin group. And we've talked about me getting involved there. And, you know, getting women in leadership and connecting with other women in leadership was important for me in this last year, just to really support myself in shifting my thinking. Because if I've been in a situation where that wasn't a thing, then I knew that if I got myself into circles where it was a thing, that I would automatically start, and I did. I found some I found some walls and some thought processes that I didn't know were there. Um, but otherwise, okay, so if I'm going into, I think my thought is who can I connect with and how can I connect and how can I grow my circle? I really think that those are probably my primary. And as soon as when I go to a polka dot event or something like that, I'm like, I want to meet these people. I've got like 5 slips they need to hand out. Like, I want to do one-on-one connections with everybody. I want to learn who you are. What are you doing? What is I for me, I think I want to get to know people on a deeper level and really truly get below the rug or um, maybe it's how can I help you? Like, do I know someone that I can connect you with? Because I do love connecting people. And so if I get to learn a little bit more about you, then who can I introduce you to? Do you want to be on a podcast? Do you want to sponsor this? Do you want to do that? I don't know.
well,
I'm thinking about all the things.
that's good. I mean, and so if you enter the networking event
Yeah.
with that mindset, that's great. And then you come home
Hmm.
afterwards, and maybe you have a bunch of business cards.
Yeah.
Then the question is, what do you do next?
Oh, ouch. So if I do not follow up in the meeting or like within 5 minutes of the meeting, I have those piles of business cards sitting here that I haven't done anything with.
And see, that's going back to what we said before. That's what I often see
Yeah.
between the introverts or extroverts is that an extrovert will come in and make all these connections, and the excitement is from meeting the people,
Yeah.
where the creating business
Mhm.
happens afterward, right?
Right.
Whereas an introvert might be, you know, worried about having to meet a bunch of people. For them, their goal could be meet two people,
Right.
bring back two business cards, and then do the next step. Because introverts generally are better at one on one conversations
Yeah. Yeah.
than at conversations in a big room of people. And these are just huge, generalizations, because
Right. Right.
for the people that I coach, it comes down to what else goes on with them that's authentic for them, and
Mhm.
finding their path to, using their strengths to be. who they are wherever they are.
So how did you get into this? Like, what made you decide that it was the mindset piece that you really wanted to be able to help people with? I mean, I know that it's made a huge difference in my life, so I can speak to it, but I'm curious for you.
Sure. So the journey went from the journey,
Yeah.
very coachy thing to say, right?
Yep.
But it's true. The journey went from coaching people to develop business to seeing how everything is about relationships,
Mm,
and then moving that into leadership coaching, because so many of the obstacles were things that people needed to work on that also made them better leaders, doing a
right.
better job of listening, keeping yourself organized, delegating, all kinds of things. All of those things were kind of in this lump. So I got my first coaching certification as a leadership and talent management coach.
Hmm.
And then as I continued forward, almost every conversation I would have with the people I was coaching was how to have specific conversations. Like,
Mm,
I don't think so and so is hearing me, or I don't know how to reach out to this person I met at a networking event, that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And then literally role playing with people on those conversations. So I took a course, and this was the transformation. I took a course on, I can't even think of the name of it, conversational. I was being transformed.
Yeah, yeah.
I took a course on conversational intelligence. And the very first, well, not the very first thing they had us do was write down 100 aspirations for
Oh,
ourselves, which was really hard.
right. I remember doing this with employees. This is what I would do at usually towards the end of the year, or maybe towards Thanksgiving, because people are starting to feel that crunch financially and they're like, oh, the holidays are coming. I could use some extra cash. And so I would say, write 100 goals or up to 100 goals for up to $100, every dollar for every goal you write, or aspiration, basically. Like, what are some things that would be amazing if they could be true? And most of the employees had never done anything like it. And they were like, what
Yes.
is this? It's like
I know it
super
really
fun.
makes you, it
Yeah.
shakes up your head. And then
Yeah.
the next thing that they told us to do was spend a week listening more than you speak, which
Mm,
is, everyone should do that. But
right.
then the next part of it was, and making no assumptions.
Oof. And you found how many assumptions you'd been making?
Yeah, everyone does
Yeah.
every 3 seconds, right? And
Yeah.
so that's where the transformation and the focus on mindset happened.
Hmm.
Because as I went through that and did a better job listening to the people I was coaching,
Right.
I started to hear so much of making assumptions about whether somebody is going to be interested in
Mm,
hiring you
right.
before you even talk to them, right?
Right.
Or being in a meeting and someone says something, and instead of asking another question to understand better what they're saying, you make an, or I should say, I make an
Right.
assumption
Right.
of what their meaning was, and it's not always true. And so that's
Hmm.
where I realized the focus is mindset. So with clients, I'm discovering that even if we're starting on business development, let's say,
Hmm.
and they've got their list of targets, and we're talking about how they're moving from one step to the next with all their targets. At some point in that coaching, mindset is going to emerge,
Yeah. Yep.
you know, as something that really needs to be paid attention to and delved into.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are shifting the conversations for your clients, the things that they're thinking about, and along the way, as you're an entrepreneur, as you're an entrepreneur for yourself,
Right.
and dealing with your own mindset things, what are some of the things that you've learned either to be aware of for yourself? What are some of the crazy things that have come up that, as an entrepreneur, you totally get it now?
Oh, for sure, right? Because I was working with people who were developing their own
Yeah.
books of business. Just that, that fear.
Yeah.
Like, you wake up in the morning and you're running your own business, and you
Hmm.
need to jump out of bed and reach out to 10 people who you
Hmm.
already know. And then there's that fear at the back of your mind that says, oh, they don't want to hear from me.
Right.
They don't want to give me a referral. They don't want to, whatever. And
Assumptions.
right, all of
Hmm.
these assumptions. And then, for myself, I created a habit where I sit down and I write that stuff down in the morning. Of course, I have more than one journal,
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. I have a notebook addiction. We don't want to talk about that.
right? Because you have
I
to.
actually switched to colored paper to see if that could make a difference for each project so I could have a different color. But it's still a work in progress.
Well, so my journals, well, I designated them for different things, but it's really
Hmm.
whichever one's nearby when I need
Yes.
to write something down. But just the exercise of writing down, I keep thinking,
Hmm.
I can't reach out to these people today because they don't want, and I write them all down.
Acknowledging the
And then I
fears.
purposely redirect my mind
Hmm.
and tell myself what I tell my clients.
Hmm.
You are not giving that other person a chance.
Hmm.
You're having a one sided conversation
Yeah.
and shutting things down before they can even start.
Hmm.
So then you switch it, right? Like
Huge stuff.
what would be ways that you switch your thinking? I
For
should,
me,
yeah, like how would you, let's
I'm in
say,
the hot seat again.
whatever,
I love it.
whatever it's about,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be about reaching out to potential clients, but whatever it might be about for you, if you know that there's something that sticks for you
Yeah.
and you have that, what do you do to switch yours?
So when I first started doing some of the work, I did like writing it out. My coach called it a fear inventory, like writing down the things that I'm afraid of and then turning it around and, basically saying thank you. And then I ended up switching it to prayers along the way and being very intentional about my prayers, believing that really God has my back and they can totally be taken care of. And it shifts. What I've noticed is it shifts my energy when I shift to
Mhm.
a state of thankfulness or gratefulness that it's already being taken care of. And so that's one of the things, like in my relationships, with my spouse or with my kids, when things come up and I'm just like, all of a sudden everything hits the ceiling, like mentally fireworks just explode in the brain. And then or everything's dropping, and it feels like it's just like this total breakdown. I mean, it seems like I'm on either end of the spectrum sometimes. And what I've found is that if I can shift my mindset to one of thankfulness, like that I've already gotten through it or that it's already being taken care of, and like, oh, well, I can let it go now. And my whole body energy shifts. Like, I don't know how to explain but it's the same thing, right? I mean, we're talking about the same things just in different
Absolutely. I
ways
think
of.
that's so interesting because I think at different times in our lives we need different messages.
Right.
And I did go through a time frame where I shifted my energy to thankfulness.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. And it's when you do something like that, you're changing your focus.
Right.
And by changing your focus, you see the things that will help you to reach whatever it is you're trying to obtain, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to seeing things that might be negative, and then you're
Right.
constantly directing your energy in that
Towards the
direction.
fear, towards the what if, towards the doubts, towards the I can't get over this. Seriously, I just, like, I mean, we say things that we don't even realize we're saying. I noticed this for myself, like, oh, this is killing me, or I've heard people say, my job is killing me. Well, eventually it will. Like, our
Exactly.
thoughts matter, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I really believe that absolutely everything is mindset. It
Hmm.
affects your energy,
Yes.
it affects what you're focused on. I think as soon as one of my clients, says, "Oh, I wrote down what I wanted, like you told me,
Yeah.
very specifically." And it's like, now I see these opportunities everywhere.
Right. Right. It's the red car. I mean, as soon as you buy a
Right.
car or whatever, then you see them everywhere and they didn't exist before. That's like as soon as we shift our mind and realize this is actually everywhere.
Hmm.
It was just
And
blind to me.
exactly. And the thing that's interesting as well is that there are people who It takes a very long time. I can think of someone
Yeah.
I've been coaching where it was a full, I think, 8 months before they were in the space where they could tell themselves, you can do it,
Yeah.
as opposed to listening to the negatives.
And there's layers to that. There's so many other voices, people's voices that have been in our heads for a long time. That's not
Yes.
even our own. We've just let the volume be really high. And yeah, I mean, space and grace for anyone that it takes 8 months for, because sometimes it's taken me 18 months. Like,
Oh,
no shame coming from the peanut gallery over here.
oh, I know, me too. I wrote a post right at the end of the year or the beginning of the year because one of my biggest things, you talk about fears,
Yeah.
is just kind of general anxiety and
Yes.
worry
Yes.
and
Yes.
being anxious and worrying about
It's just the
everything.
body manifesting all the
Right.
doubts and fears in our brains. Yeah.
So I spent quite a bit of time on my own. It probably took me the full year
Yeah.
to get to a space where, and I would never say, oh, I'm cured. I'm never going to worry or have anxiety
Right.
again, because I will.
Right.
But getting myself to a space where I can manage that
Yeah.
and redirect my thoughts. And
Wow.
so, same thing,
I love that.
probably 12 months, probably 30 years. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I know it
But
really kind of depends on the situation, depends what we're working through, how deep it is for us, how long we've carried it around. Because I had a situation where a potential business partner and I are talking about some future ideas. And when it was coming up, I was getting huge anxiety, like in the moment, like, oh my word, this is big. And I just had to ask myself, is this big? Because this is a growth moment for me, and I am meant to step into this and step through it. Or is this anxiety of like, you're too much, too fast, back off? This is not where you're supposed to be. And the reality is, it was a growth moment where it's an opportunity for me to step into. And so then the anxiety is just, it's, it, I use it now to be able to say, hey, this is a growth opportunity. How do you want to handle this? Like, yes, it's anxiety and I'm nervous.
well, and that's the thing, stress is a good thing,
Right, right,
and too much stress becomes a bad thing,
right,
it becomes
right.
toxic and leads to burnout. But sounds to me like
Mm,
this was a good kind of stress.
it was. Yeah, was that
There's
moment.
still there's still a lot to do, right? I mean, you still
Yes,
have to do all the things to
yes,
make it into the the
correct.
to
I
realize
still
the
have to
growth.
step into it fully. Being able to work through this stuff, because when you do the work, it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make it so that the layers don't exist or that this anxiety never comes up again, like you said, but it just makes it so that we know we can get through it. It's
Mhm.
not um I don't know if you have any clients like this, but I was so stuck for so long and I didn't know how to get through the stuck. So then it just seemed like I was in molasses all the time versus being like,
Right.
okay, I can get out. I know I'm going to get out of this even if I'm moving into the next pod.
Well, and that's one of the things that my clients ask for the most is specifics. Okay,
Mhm.
so you've identified this thing, and that's part of what makes coaching different from therapy, right?
Right.
We've identified this thing, now what? And
Mhm.
then it's our job to help the clients come up with ways to move beyond it.
Right.
For many of my clients, there's a lack of awareness. So I use a couple of different tools, the EQ test, for emotional intelligence is a good one.
So tell me more about
Because,
that. That's a personality assessment I don't know enough about yet.
yeah, so it's what's his name? Dr. Travis Bradbury.
Okay.
And he has a book. He wrote the book called EQ2, and you get the
Okay.
book, and there's a little thing in there that you go up to onto their website and type the code in, and you can take the assessment. And basically, what it measures is there's four quadrants. You know, they all love the four quadrants, and
Mhm.
what are you going to put in the quadrants? Well, in this case, first one is self awareness. The second is self management.
Hmm.
The third is social awareness. And then the fourth is relationship management.
So
Uh,
that's why you started focusing on relationships, recognizing that as people, as we grow our EQ, our emotional intelligence,
right.
then we grow our ability to relate and to have relationships that are deeper, healthier, more meaningful, more connected. Oh my word. I love this.
Absolutely. Because, the way that I see it is like everything starts, you have to go inward first
Right.
and
Yes.
figure out what's going on in here.
Mhm.
And many people, they'll take the EQ and they'll find out that they're not emotionally aware, they're not self aware.
Right. Right. I mean, I've
First of
heard
all,
so often,
right.
I don't even know who I am. People will say that, like at that level.
Exactly. You know what that reminds me of? A lot of times I'll ask people, I'll literally will ask people, give me 5 words that describe who you are.
Mhm.
And they'll say mother,
Yep.
daughter,
They're
their profession,
they're
you
roles.
know, their
Mhm.
roles.
We're defined by our
And
roles.
right. And then I'll say, well,
Mhm.
okay, that's stuff you do
Yeah.
and the roles that you play, but who are you?
Yeah.
And so many people have problem and they're like, and
Yeah.
it's like, let's leave that as a think about, something that you can think
That's
about.
so awesome. That's the first
But
step.
so the awareness, the self awareness is like understanding what emotions you're having, when you're having them, and why you're having them, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And that second quadrant with self management is you understand that you're having an emotion, but you're not doing a good job of managing yourself.
Wow.
So yeah, so like some people need to work in that quadrant. And someone I worked with, it was really interesting that they had very high self awareness and really high social awareness. So, very aware of how other people in the room
Mhm.
would view and react to things, but their biggest problem was self management.
So explain that.
So, what it is they're completely aware of how they feel and what they feel. And they're really good, like they are empathetic and do a good job of reading a room. But if something triggers them, they have very little control over how they respond.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Or even if
sense.
they're not triggered, just generally,
Mhm.
it might be the kind of people who say things that are upsetting to others because they're just
Mhm.
not managing their, you know,
Mm.
their surroundings or how they're acting in a meeting compared to how they're acting in a one-on-one conversation with somebody, that kind of thing.
So I
So
have a
that's self
question. Sorry.
management. Go
I have a
ahead.
question that may or may not be relevant.
Okay.
But the more that we hear about autism and the spectrum,
Mm.
I am aware that there are some that have different levels of like social interaction or social, how do you respond to this? So are you seeing that or finding anything with that in anyone that you're working with? Or is it literally just a social awareness or a self management? Like, is there a overlap?
I think that's interesting. So I do not focus particularly on anybody who has mental differences or would be on those spectrums.
Right.
But as I work with people, I have more and more people who tell me, as adults, that they think they have ADD
Right.
or
Right.
they think they might have had this or they might have had that.
Right.
So that is something,
Undiagnosed, you're saying, like, they're just
right?
kind of starting to connect the dots because they're like, "Man, I really just kind of struggled in these areas."
Hmm.
That's
And
that's what
that's
I'm connecting the dots on too right now because I don't know, piecing a couple things together. It's like that's interesting.
well, I think that that's part of what makes it so great to live in the day and age that we live in
Yeah.
now,
Yep.
right? Because people are starting to talk about these mental differences as well, or brain differences is another way
Right. Right.
to categorize it, and also become more aware. So that, let's say I'm talking with someone and that person doesn't look me in the eye.
Yep.
So instead of running back to my office and calling up my 3 friends and saying, I can't believe this guy never looks me in the eye,
Uh,
blah, 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 blah,
I have an itch. I used to do
right?
stuff like this. Yes.
Right. And you're
It's
like,
so much more
so,
fun to vent about it than to change me. Just saying.
well, true, right? Because it's what we're used to and we're comfortable, and you
Mhm.
go and you find
Yeah.
your group. and
Yes.
the people who will understand and support you. Where I think now, as we have more conversations, just we as the world
Yes.
have more conversations about this, the thought might be, oh, I'm going to take a step back here.
Yeah.
I noticed that so and so never meets my eyes. I wonder if he's on the spectrum.
Mhm.
Or even if it's not, like, end of
Right.
the day, who cares
Low
if there's a diagnosis?
confidence, anything
Right.
that
Why?
it has nothing to do with us. Yeah.
Right. And that's a
Mhm.
big one. That right there
Yeah. Yeah.
is people individualizing. I can't even remember the number of times my husband has said to me, if when I would be in my anxiety mode,
Mhm.
about, so and so, whatever, didn't look at me, didn't whatever. My husband would say, honey, 90% of the time or 95% of the time, it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's true. So that's
It's
such a
super
huge one.
true.
I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Speaking of mindset. So when you think about the people that you've been able to help in this space, what are some of the things that you've seen happen in relationships after doing some of this work?
I believe that people have more authentic relationships.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's interesting, because of COVID, I
Mhm.
believe one of the positives of COVID, where anyone and everyone at any moment could be sick,
Right.
and everyone's lives were, turned upside down. There came an opportunity for people to sort of remove the business mask,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Especially as people were getting on Zoom calls and everyone was seeing, the mess in the
Right.
house behind you,
Right.
the dogs barking, the kids running around,
Yes.
or
Mhm.
whatever it is that you might have been dealing with. And I think there was a higher level of genuine just caring for each other,
Mhm.
asking people how they were doing because we knew that so many people were having a hard time.
Hmm.
And that presented this, I think, this huge opportunity for people to develop closer and stronger relationships, outside of your friends and family.
Right. Right.
Right.
And geographical circles too. Like
Right.
expand your borders in so many
Yes.
ways. Yeah.
Yes. And so, so if we piggyback on those opportunities,
Mhm.
people realize it's okay to be yourself. Like if a client is going to hire you,
Yeah.
in the majority of cases, they want to know who you are.
Yes, it's 100% true. Like I have been working through that myself because as a mom of 6 boys, I want to be able to juggle life and business, and I don't necessarily want them to be like where one has to be shoved in a closet while I'm working with the other one.
Right.
And so as I'm giving myself permission for them to merge, I'm realizing what comes up and I'm seeing what comes up and yet I know that if somebody else is in the same situation as me, I'm not going to look at it from the same perspective. I don't have the same um like judgment that I do for myself or
Right.
expectation, you know. And so it's been really good to figure out and realize like it's okay. This is just it's a new space where these things are more accepted and like you said, dogs barking. Like 10 years ago, if a dog barked in the middle of a meeting, like that would not have been and now you could say BRB and shut your video camera off and walk out of the meeting.
And everybody gets it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're like, not a problem.
And they give grace to you. And because they need to have grace given to them
Right.
when something
Right.
happens. And it really is true. That's one of the another biggest thing. You're bringing them all
I
up.
love it.
But another one of the biggest thing is how the majority of people are harder on themselves than
Yeah.
anyone else ever would be.
Yes. Yeah.
And the idea that it's okay to make a mistake
Yeah.
in our culture, in so many, especially with some of the very, high potential individuals that I deal with, that I coach,
Mhm.
they're afraid to, or were afraid to make mistakes,
Right. Right.
right?
Versus recognizing that mistakes are part of the process. It's hard. Like space for the fact that they're putting themselves out there and asking you to help them with this because um Even if our personalities are okay with not being perfect, man, I was in a room this last year with women in business, and it was a packed room. Granted, the room was small, but it was a packed room, standing room only, on how to deal with perfectionism. And the problem was, yes, I'm saying this on a podcast, the person at the front of the room was a counselor, therapist, and at the end of the presentation did not give anybody a solution on how to dealing with their perfectionism. It was sort of like, why are you a perfectionist? Why are you dealing with this? And it was about the beliefs. I know, I can see your confused look. I know. I was in the room just like painfully aware that no one was getting helped. And then at the end, they said, so do we all just need to call you for an appointment? And she goes, actually, I don't even like therapy work and I'm booked and I have a waiting list. So there's actually no room for you to come. I was like,
What is the
what just
point?
happened? Yeah. So here's what I got out of it. There's room for speakers like you and I in
Yes.
future sessions. Like, we don't have to be perfect because the other people at the front of the room aren't perfect either. They don't even have room to help clients after they're done. I was like, ah, but this is a huge issue. Perfectionism is holding us back from being, right?
Well, and this takes me back. I was talking with someone just on Friday over lunch about when my son would come home from school.
Mhm.
My husband was the stay at home dad. My husband would pick him up. He'd be absolutely happy. Then I would come home, and when it was bedtime, everything in his whole day was terrible.
Mm.
Oh, this and that, and oh, and then this happened. And
Mm.
I created a space for him. I said, okay, look, you can complain about three things every night, but then you have to tell me one good thing that happened.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the answer with like the perfectionism, although I
Mhm.
wouldn't necessarily say three things.
Right,
But
right.
for people is to, kind of go through with a journaling or a process or however it is you need to write down one thing that you wish you had done better today.
Mhm.
And if you want to use the word mistake, use the
Mhm.
word mistake. But one thing you wish you would have done better. But then you have to, just
Yeah,
like I said to my son, write down one thing that you did well.
right.
And
Celebrating the celebrations along with recognizing the mistakes, aka lessons
right.
that we're willing to learn from. And someone pointed out to me, which was really good. He said, when we acknowledge our mistakes, it does mean that we're willing to see something that we could learn from, right? And maybe, I don't like using the word failures or even regrets. Like, how can we move through it in a way where we forgive ourselves? And,
Hmm.
and that's the other piece that helps us. Like, forgiving others and forgiving ourselves. Oh my goodness.
There's so much. And I think in those circumstances, everybody needs a chance to
Hmm.
talk with someone else to get them
Right.
through it.
Right. Right.
You need someone to listen, and you need to have someone who will give grace to you
Hmm.
and then help you move forward,
Yeah.
because
It's huge.
it's huge. And it's like we talked about before, it takes time.
Yeah.
Some people say you can develop a new habit in 3 months. Some people
Yeah.
say 3 weeks. I say it depends on which habit is you're trying to. But we're just always learning, which is what's I think is exciting,
Right.
evolving.
Evolving.
My
Look at
brother
that.
used to say, I have to say this, it's too funny. He would always, on his birthday, he would say, I look back at the last year and I realize how much how much stupider I was than I am now.
That's what we said this last year. We're like, oh my word, can you believe where we were a year ago? And the mountains that have been moved mentally? Like, we're just, and I'm thankful for that, right? That we can look back and say, I'm not in the same place that I was. I mean, even though it's crazy, you look back and you're like, did I really think that?
That's
Yes, I
awesome.
did.
I just talked to a client today, a former client, who told me that. one of his biggest learnings was to not worry if
Yeah.
somebody didn't and he's trying to touch base with them to develop business, to no longer worry that when somebody doesn't reply or doesn't want to
Yeah.
meet.
Huge.
He was able to finally just let it go.
Hmm. That's huge stuff. I've found over the last year when we talk about things like that, when I'm selling for someone else, it's easier for me to let that go than when I'm selling for myself. So even if we've been doing different jobs, even if we're starting businesses in ways where we might have been successful in another area, new things come up. I don't know if you see that with your clients, but that's what I'm experiencing, like just in real life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you make a plan
Hmm.
and you start moving forward on the plan, and then a whole bunch of things happen and you deal with all the things, and then you
Hmm.
come back to your plan and you think, oh, which of this is what reality is now.
Hmm.
Which parts of these am I going to deal with? And then also, um, anytime you're working on improving yourself,
Yeah.
you're never done,
Thanks.
right? Like you spend, it's just the truth.
Well, there's always another level. That's what I heard from she's someone leading a multi-billion dollar organization. It's a woman, and she said there's always another level. I feel like my kids when they play Minecraft. There's always another level.
There's always another level, right? There's always something else, to challenge you. And that's what makes life exciting. And we're
Yeah.
all up to the challenge.
Right.
Everyone has a gift. I believe this,
Yeah.
and I have believed it my whole life. I think people are smart in all different ways, and everyone has something to offer to society and to the world. And it's a matter of finding your thing and then working on yourself and just, being the best you can be on any given day.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you would love for people to know about what you do or about business in general? What comes to mind that you'd love to share?
I would love to share that no matter who you are, what your type might be, and people will always say, oh, I'm to this, oh, I'm to that. And the answer is, you just are.
Hmm.
So spend some time and be thankful for who you are, and then share those gifts with people in the way you want to share them. There's space for everyone.
Hmm. I love that. This is a side comment before I let you go.
Sure.
Are you is there anything that you would love for coaches to know that are building businesses?
It's interesting. I think the number one thing for people building business when they own their own companies is patience,
Oh, yes.
right? You know,
Yes.
you're
Shift the
working,
expectations.
right. I mean, and
Yeah.
it's great to have aspirational goals,
Mhm.
but then also remember that um, this is something new
Right.
that's being offered, and it gains momentum.
Yeah.
You need to keep it moving forward, just like with your self improvement. But then really think about, what is success for you. I define the success and just realize that it is
Mhm.
possible for you to succeed, but you have to be patient. You have to
Mhm.
let those relationships develop, and then keep yourself moving, keep learning how to do a better job
Mm.
at what you do.
Yeah. Well, I know as a shaper type personality that I love to be patient for the plan, right? Like if I have something I'm moving towards, then I can be patient. And in real estate development, that was easier because we talk about it differently. Like, here's what the architect created, here's what we're building, and then you take it to the bank, and then you get everybody involved. And by this point, you're all in. You sold the banker, you sold the architect. People started to design it, and it's on paper. Versus a coaching business, we don't go and do it in that way and get these other people behind us, rallying around our idea and then being like, yeah, this is actually a thing. And so it's interesting how the different industries have the same. It's the time is still a thing, right? Like if I'm going to develop real estate, it doesn't happen overnight, but my expectation isn't that it'll happen overnight. versus when it's us and our business. Why isn't that done yet?
Right. And remember, you're the product,
Right.
right? So the
Mm,
thing that you're selling is your
mm,
knowledge, your
yeah.
presence
Yeah.
as a coach. So you need to have a strategy in mind of how to start and then continue to build and expand. But you do need to have patience. It
I
takes
love
time.
it. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for
Thank
everything that
you.
you do.
And thank you so much, Jamie, for having me on this wonderful podcast. It was fun.